I stood on the porch with my suitcase by my feet, staring at the door like it might open again if I waited long enough. It didn't. The last thing I heard before the wood slammed shut was my mother's voice, sharp and final, the kind of voice that doesn't just speak, it cuts. "You're nothing but an ugly college dropout. Don't you dare show your face at this family again." For a second, I couldn't even breathe. I kept my hand hovering near the doorknob like a child who didn't understand that some doors don't reopen. Through the front window, I saw warm light, familiar furniture, the living room I'd grown up in. I even saw my younger sister on the couch, laughing with our parents like nothing had happened, like I wasn't standing outside with my whole life collapsing at 22. That was 5 years ago. My name is Julia. I'm 27 now. Back then, I was the family embarrassment. The daughter who didn't make the cut. The one who didn't match the image my parents were obsessed with. In my house, love was never something you got for free. It was something you earned, and even then it could be taken away the moment you disappointed them. Cassandra never disappointed them. Cassandra was everything I wasn't. Beautiful in a way people noticed when she walked into a room. Smart without even trying. Confident, charming, the kind of girl who made teachers smile and adults brag. She didn't just fit in our parents' world, she elevated it. We grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, in a home that looked perfect from the outside. Successful parents, big house, nice cars, parties where everyone smiled a little too hard. My parents were business owners, the kind who cared deeply about what people whispered about them at dinners and country club events. They wanted daughters who looked like polished extensions of their success. Cassandra was exactly that. Me, I was the other one. I learned early how it worked. Praise wasn't based on effort, it was based on optics. Compliments weren't about who you were, they were about what you made them look like. If you made them proud publicly, you got warmth. If you embarrassed them, you got ice. And I embarrassed them constantly, without even meaning to. I wasn't the pretty daughter. I wasn't the one people turned to watch. I was quieter, more awkward, more ordinary in a family that treated ordinary like a disease. So I tried to make up for it with the one thing that made me feel alive. Art. When I was a kid, I drew constantly. Not because I wanted attention, but because it was the only place I felt in control. Colors made sense. Shapes made sense. If I messed up, I could erase and try again. Real life wasn't like that. I still remember being 8 years old and racing into the house with a drawing my teacher had taped up in class. She told me I had talent. She said my imagination was big. I held that paper like it was gold and ran to my parents, certain they would finally see me. My mother barely glanced at it and told me to go do homework. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. I didn't understand then, but I understand now. They didn't hate my art. They hated what it represented, that I might become someone they couldn't brag about in the right circles. By the time I was in college, I had chosen graphic design. I loved it. I loved working with visuals, building brands, creating something from nothing. When I sat at a computer with a blank screen, I didn't feel like the plain daughter or the disappointment. I felt capable. My parents saw it as an insult. They wanted business or law. Something prestigious. Something they could say with a proud smile at a dinner table. When I told my father my major, he stared at me like I'd admitted to being a criminal. "Graphic design is for people who can't do real work," he said. "You're wasting our money on nonsense." My mother was worse because she didn't just disapprove, she compared. Always compared. "Your sister is going to be a doctor," she'd say like it was a weapon. "What are you going to be, someone who makes pretty pictures?" Every phone call home turned into an interrogation. Every visit became a lecture. They critiqued my choices, my body, my face, my future. They made it clear that whatever I was, it wasn't enough. And after a while, I started to believe them. The pressure didn't make me work harder, it crushed me. It didn't motivate me, it hollowed me out. I started losing sleep. I started shaking for no reason. I started crying in the bathroom and then washing my face like nothing happened. My stomach was always tight. My thoughts were always loud. When I finally admitted I was struggling, that I felt depressed, that my anxiety was getting worse, they dismissed it like I had asked them to applaud my weakness. "Stop being dramatic," my mother snapped. "Get tougher," my father said, like mental illness was a personality flaw. My grades slipped. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't focus. I couldn't breathe. I'd sit in lectures and hear nothing. I'd stare at assignments and feel my chest tighten until it was impossible to start. I stopped eating properly. I stopped going out. I stopped replying to friends because I didn't have energy to pretend I was okay. And then came the night I don't like remembering. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet. I was alone in my dorm room, sitting on the floor with my back against the bed, feeling like I had fallen into a hole that no one could see. I couldn't picture the future. I couldn't picture myself succeeding. I couldn't even picture myself surviving another semester. So I made a decision that felt like surrender and survival at the same time. I left college. Not because I wanted to quit, but because I couldn't see any other way to stay alive. When I told my parents, everything exploded. My mother screamed for hours. Not about my health. Not about whether I was safe. About how embarrassed she was. About how I made them look. About how I was throwing my life away. She called me selfish, stupid, weak. She told me I was ruining the family name. My father didn't yell. He didn't have to. He looked at me with a cold disgust I still feel in my bones and said, "You're no longer my daughter." And Cassandra stood in the doorway watching. I will never forget her face, that small smirk like she was enjoying the show. She liked being the good one. She liked having proof that she was better. My failure was her favorite mirror. They gave me a week. A week to pack my things and leave. No money. No help. No backup plan. No family. At 22, I stood on the porch with my suitcase and realized I had nowhere to go. I couch surfed with friends, working whatever jobs I could grab. Waitressing, retail shifts, cleaning offices late at night. Sometimes I'd finish one job, change in a restroom, and head straight to the next one. I was exhausted all the time. Humiliated. Angry. And terrified. There were nights I lay awake staring at ceilings that weren't mine, listening to the house breathe around me, wondering if my mother was right, wondering if I really was nothing. But in those months, something changed. It didn't feel inspirational. It felt ugly at first. It felt like anger. Not the kind where you scream, the kind where you go quiet and decide you will not die the way they wanted you to die. You will not disappear just because they erased you. You will not spend the rest of your life being the failure they can point at to make themselves feel superior. So I started saving every dollar I could. I taught myself advanced design software at night using free online tutorials, watching videos with earbuds in so I wouldn't wake whoever was letting me sleep on their couch. I built a portfolio piece by piece, even when I was exhausted. I messaged small businesses and offered to design logos and websites cheap, not because I thought I deserved cheap, but because I needed a way in. And slowly, work started coming. Not a lot at first. Just enough to remind me I wasn't imagining my talent. Enough to prove that my hands could create value even if my family refused to see it. There were nights I went to bed hungry because I chose to pay for internet instead of groceries. There were moments I almost quit because the voice in my head sounded like my mother, telling me I was foolish for thinking I could succeed without them. But I kept going. Because the only thing worse than failing was letting them be right. And 5 years later, on a warm spring evening, a message popped up on my social media from someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. It was an old high school friend. And she was inviting me to Cassandra's graduation party. I stared at that invitation for a long time, like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Cassandra's graduation party. Upscale. venue downtown. A massive celebration. It wasn't even coming from my parents. It wasn't coming from Cassandra. It was coming from an old high school friend who probably thought she was doing something nice, like she was reconnecting people who had drifted apart. But nothing about this was normal drifting. My family didn't drift away from me. They threw me away. So the first thing I felt wasn't excitement. It was suspicion, sharp and immediate. Why would they want me there after what they said to me, after that door slammed in my face, after 5 years of silence? Then I remembered something that hurt in a different way. They didn't want me there. This wasn't a real invitation from them. This was social courtesy passing through someone else's hands. Like a flyer taped to a wall. Like my presence didn't matter enough to be addressed directly. I sat there in my apartment that I had earned with my own exhausted work, my own long nights, my own stubborn refusal to collapse. I looked around at the life I'd built, not glamorous, but real. Mine. The furniture I paid for. The calm I fought for. The freedom I claimed. And still, a small part of me, the part that had been bruised at 22 and never fully healed, wanted something I hated admitting. I wanted them to see me. Not the girl they called ugly. Not the dropout. Not the weak daughter who cracked under pressure. I wanted them to see the woman who survived them. For the next week, the invitation sat like a weight in my head. Some days I told myself I wouldn't go. Why would I walk back into a place where I had been humiliated? Why would I give them access to me again, even for a moment? I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need closure. But other days, I imagined walking in with my head up, letting them recognize me too late, letting the room watch them realize they had misjudged me. I imagined their smiles tightening, their eyes flicking nervously, their perfect story wobbling. And that image, I won't lie, felt satisfying. The party was scheduled for Saturday evening at one of the most exclusive event venues in Nashville. I already knew what it would look like. My parents loved spectacle. They loved anything that made people whisper, "Wow, they really did it right." Cassandra's accomplishments weren't just her accomplishments, they were proof that my parents had created something impressive. They didn't just want a daughter to graduate medical school, they wanted a reason to throw a party that looked like a magazine spread. I decided to go. Not because I missed them. Not because I wanted reconciliation. I decided to go because I was done hiding from the version of myself that still wanted to be seen. I wasn't going to pretend I was unaffected by what they did. I was going to face it and survive it in real time. The days leading up to Saturday felt strange. Memories I hadn't touched in years rose up like they'd been waiting for permission. I remembered being 13 and overhearing my mother on the phone with her sister, speaking in that careless way people do when they don't think they'll be heard. "She's going to be the plain one," my mother said. "Cassandra has the face, but Julia. I hope at least she'll be smart enough to make up for it." I remember standing at the top of the stairs, my stomach turning, my hands cold. I didn't even cry. I just went back to my room and stared at the mirror like it was evidence of a crime. I remembered being 16 and winning a design competition at school. My work had been chosen out of dozens of submissions. I came home with a certificate, practically glowing, and my parents barely reacted because Cassandra had made honor roll again. "Good for you," my mother said without looking up. Then she turned to Cassandra and asked what she wanted for dinner. That was the pattern. My joy was background noise. Cassandra's success was a headline. Those memories should have made me back out. They should have reminded me how pointless it was to seek validation from people who had trained themselves to withhold it. Instead, those memories made me angry. Not wild angry, focused angry. The kind that strengthens your spine. Because in my apartment now, in a life I built from scratch, I could finally say what I never had the courage to say back then. Their opinion doesn't matter. I had already proven myself to the only person who counts, me. Saturday arrived. I took my time getting ready, not in a frantic way, but in a deliberate way. I wasn't dressing to impress my parents. I was dressing to remind myself who I am. I put on a simple black dress, elegant without trying too hard. I did my makeup carefully, not heavy, just clean and confident. I styled my hair and looked at my reflection longer than usual. The woman looking back at me didn't look like the terrified girl on that porch. She looked like someone who had been through hell and came back with her head up. The venue was even more extravagant than I expected. Crystal chandeliers. White flowers everywhere. A string quartet playing in the corner like the party needed a soundtrack to prove its class. Servers moved through the room with champagne flutes like everyone there was a VIP. It was exactly my parents. I arrived a little late on purpose, not to be dramatic, but to give myself a moment to breathe and observe. The room was packed. Family, friends, business associates, extended relatives I barely remembered. Everyone dressed like they wanted to be seen. Everyone smiling like this was the event of the year. Cassandra stood near the center like a bride at her own wedding. She wore a stunning white dress, her hair perfect, her laugh loud and confident. Her hand rested on the arm of a handsome man I didn't recognize, and I assumed he was her boyfriend. My parents flanked her, beaming with pride, basking in the attention like they had personally earned her degree. My chest tightened the way it always used to when I watched them celebrate her. That should have been me too, some part of me whispered. Not medical school, not that life, but being celebrated. Being loved. Being treated like I mattered. I took a deep breath and stepped further into the room. A few people glanced at me, but no one recognized me. 5 years changes a person. It changes your face, your posture, your energy. The old version of me had carried shame like a scent. This version didn't. I made my way to the bar and ordered a glass of wine. While I waited, I heard a voice behind me, warm and surprised. Julia? Is that you? I turned and froze. Professor Howard. One of the few people who had believed in my work when I was in college. One of the few who had encouraged me without making me feel like I had to beg for that encouragement. He looked older now, more gray, but his eyes were the same kind eyes that made you feel safe. Professor Howard, I said, honestly stunned. What are you doing here? I teach at the medical school now, he said. Cassandra was one of my students. Brilliant girl, very driven. Then his expression shifted as he studied me more closely. I heard you left school, he said gently. I always wondered what happened. You had such talent. His words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were sad, but because they were validating. He remembered me as talented, not as a disappointment. I had some personal issues, I said carefully. But I'm doing well now. I own a design agency. His face lit up like I'd given him good news he'd been waiting years to hear. You do, he said, genuinely pleased. That's wonderful. I always knew you had it in you. Your work was exceptional, even back then. We talked for a few minutes, catching up in small pieces. He asked what kind of work I did now. I told him about branding, websites, creative direction. I kept it simple, but I felt my heart steadying with every sentence. Because while my family might not see me, someone here did. When Professor Howard stepped away to greet someone else, I was left standing with my wine, feeling oddly exposed and invisible at the same time. The room was full of people who were supposed to know me, and yet I was a stranger in my own family's celebration. I moved through the party slowly, listening more than talking. Watching. Noticing. That was when I heard my mother's voice. She was standing with a group of women dressed in expensive clothes, all smiling like they'd practiced it in a mirror. We're just so proud of Cassandra, my mother said. Medical school was challenging, but she never gave up. She's always been determined, so focused, unlike some people. The last part was like a needle. She didn't say my name, but I knew she meant me. She always meant me when she talked about disappointment. Then my father joined the conversation and said something that made my body go cold. We've been very fortunate, he said. Both our daughters have done so well. I almost choked on my wine. Both our daughters? He kept talking, smooth as silk. Cassandra is going to be a doctor, and our eldest is very successful in business. I stood there frozen, my mind struggling to catch up. They disowned me. They erased me. So why were they claiming me now? One of the women smiled brightly. Oh, I didn't know you had another daughter. Where is she? I'd love to meet her. My mother didn't hesitate. She couldn't make it tonight. Work commitments. She's traveling. The lie was so effortless, so practiced, it made my skin crawl. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They weren't just pretending I didn't exist. They were pretending I existed in the exact way that benefited them. I stood there holding my glass, barely tasting the wine, as that realization settled into my bones. They weren't ashamed of me anymore. They were using me. For years, I had been the failure they erased. Now that I had succeeded without them, I had become a convenient fiction they could reshape to polish their image. The daughter who was too busy overseas, the one with the impressive career they could brag about without ever having to acknowledge how they treated her. I wanted to walk over and scream the truth right then. I wanted to interrupt their smiling circle and say, I'm standing right here. I wanted to watch their faces fall. But I didn't. Something held me back. Not fear, not weakness, but instinct. I needed to understand the full story they were telling. I needed to know how deep the lie went before I exposed it. So I moved. I drifted through the room slowly, like I was just another guest admiring the decor. I listened. I paid attention. And the more I listened, the worse it got. People talked about me as if I were a rumor. Oh yes, their older daughter is incredibly successful, one man said. Runs a design firm, I believe. I heard she's working internationally now, another woman added. Always traveling. Such ambition. My parents nodded along to all of it whenever they were nearby. Smiling. Agreeing. Accepting praise for a version of me they had nothing to do with. They told people I was abroad. That I couldn't attend family events because of work. That I sent my love but was simply too busy. They made it sound like distance was my choice, not something they had forced. It made my stomach turn. They wanted the reward of my success without the responsibility of having been decent parents. They wanted to look like they had raised two remarkable daughters while quietly discarding the one who didn't fit the mold when it mattered. As I processed this, I saw Cassandra pass by me. She was glowing, surrounded by attention, her laughter light and easy. She walked right past me without recognition. Her eyes skimmed over my face like I was just another guest. 5 years apart was apparently enough to erase me completely from her awareness. That hurt more than I expected. I followed her at a distance, careful not to draw attention, curious to hear what she said when she thought I wasn't there. She joined a group of young people near the entrance, probably her medical school friends, all buzzing with excitement and ambition. They congratulated her, praised her, asked about her future. Your family must be so proud, one of them said. They are, Cassandra replied with a smile. They've always supported me. Pushed me to be my best. Another person asked casually, do you have siblings? I have an older sister, Cassandra said, her tone shifting slightly. But we're not close. My chest tightened. She made some bad choices a few years ago, Cassandra continued. We don't really talk anymore. Bad choices. That's what she called my depression. My breakdown. My fight to stay alive. That's sad, someone said sympathetically. Cassandra shrugged. Some people just can't handle pressure. My parents tried everything, but she dropped out of college and disappeared. We honestly don't know what she's doing now. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I forced myself to stay still. She spoke about me like I was a cautionary tale, a footnote in her success story. Like my suffering was a personal flaw, not the result of years of emotional abuse. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to say, I didn't disappear. You watched me break and smiled. But again, I held back. Because the night wasn't over. I moved away from her group and toward a quieter corner of the room, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard Professor Howard's voice again. Julia, he said warmly. I want you to meet someone. He gestured to a distinguished man in an expensive suit standing beside him. This is Dr. Gregory, he said. The dean of the medical school. My heart skipped. Dr. Gregory shook my hand firmly. Professor Howard tells me you run a design agency. Yes, I said, keeping my voice calm even as my pulse raced. We've been discussing updating the medical school's website and branding, he continued. Our current materials are outdated. Would you be interested in talking about a potential contract? For a moment, the noise of the party faded. This was huge. This wasn't a favor or a courtesy. This was the kind of opportunity that could push my agency to an entirely new level. And it was happening here, in this room, while my family pretended I didn't exist. I'd be very interested, I said. We exchanged contact information, and he told me he'd reach out the following week to schedule a formal meeting. When he walked away, Professor Howard smiled at me. Opportunities have strange timing, he said gently. That's one way to put it, I replied. After he left, I needed air. I stepped out onto the terrace, the cool night breeze hitting my face, the city lights of Nashville stretching out in front of me. I leaned against the railing, trying to untangle the emotions knotting inside my chest. Anger. Validation. Disbelief. Satisfaction. Hurt. I heard footsteps behind me. Escaping the crowd, a woman asked kindly. I turned to see an elegant woman in her 50s, gray hair perfectly styled, wearing a soft blue dress. Something like that, I said. I'm Helen, she said. I work with your father. My stomach dropped slightly, but I kept my expression neutral. You look familiar, Helen said, studying my face. Have we met? I don't think so, I replied. She tilted her head, thinking. Then her eyes widened. Oh. Are you Julia? Yes, I said quietly. Her face lit up with genuine warmth. I've heard so much about you. Your parents are always talking about how well you're doing. Working overseas, right? Cassandra must be thrilled you could make it tonight. The lie had spread further than I imagined. They even showed me photos of your work, Helen continued. Your father keeps a portfolio in his office. He's so proud of both his daughters. That was almost unbearable. The man who called my career worthless. Who disowned me for choosing it. Now claiming pride he never earned. That's surprising, I said, my voice tight. Helen smiled. You must have wonderful parents. I excused myself before my composure shattered and walked back inside, my hands trembling. That's when I knew this wasn't just about emotional damage. This was about control. About image. About rewriting history. And as I scanned the room again, I realized something else. If they were willing to lie this easily about me, I needed to know what else they were willing to take. I stayed inside the room this time, moving slowly, watching everything with new eyes. What had once felt like a family celebration now looked like a carefully staged performance. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every compliment sounded transactional. My parents weren't celebrating Cassandra. They were celebrating themselves. I kept thinking about Helen's words. The portfolio. The pride. The stories they were telling. They had erased me when I was inconvenient, then resurrected a fake version of me once my success became useful. That's when I saw Cassandra slip away from her group. She moved quickly, glancing around as she walked down the hallway toward the private rooms off the main hall. Something in her body language caught my attention. She wasn't relaxed anymore. She looked tense, alert. I followed her at a distance, my heels silent on the carpet. She stepped into one of the smaller conference rooms and closed the door behind her. I waited a few seconds, then moved closer. The door wasn't fully latched. I could hear her voice clearly. "Mom, I know," she said into her phone, irritation sharp in her tone. "I'm handling it." My stomach dropped. I leaned closer without touching the door. "No one's asked about her directly," Cassandra continued. "Everyone believes the story. That she's overseas. Busy. Successful." There was a pause. I could hear my mother's voice faintly on the other end, though not clearly enough to make out words. "What if she shows up?" Cassandra scoffed. "Mom, she doesn't even know about the party. We didn't invite her. And even if she somehow found out, she wouldn't have the nerve to come back after 5 years." My heart was pounding now. So it wasn't accidental. It wasn't oversight. They had deliberately excluded me. Cassandra paced as she listened. "Yes, I talked to the lawyer last week. He said because she's been out of contact and there's documentation of her dropping out and cutting ties, we should be able to argue she forfeited her share." I felt dizzy. "For the trust fund," Cassandra added casually. "It'll take some paperwork, but he's confident." The trust fund. My grandmother had set one up for both of us before she died. I hadn't thought about it in years. I'd been too focused on surviving, too proud to touch money I wanted to earn on my own. Apparently, my family hadn't forgotten. "Don't worry," Cassandra laughed softly. "She made her choice when she dropped out. That money should go to someone who actually did something with their education. Someone who made you proud." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. She chose to throw her life away. That's how she framed my depression. My collapse. My fight to stay alive. My hands were shaking as I pulled my phone out and hit record. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I captured every word. When the call ended, I backed away quietly, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. I turned the corner and leaned against the wall, my body buzzing with shock and fury. This wasn't just emotional cruelty. This was theft. They weren't only lying about me to protect their image. They were actively planning to steal money that legally belonged to me, money my grandmother had left so both her granddaughters would be secure. I walked back into the main hall in a daze. Music played. Laughter floated. Glasses clinked. No one noticed that my entire understanding of my family had just shifted. I pulled out my phone and texted the one person who knew everything. My business partner, Jordan. Need legal help. Family trying to steal inheritance. Have recording of admission. What do I do? The reply came almost immediately. Do not confront them yet. Leave the party if you can. Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. Bring everything. We'll handle this properly. He was right. But I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Because at that moment, my father stepped onto the small stage near the back of the room, tapping the microphone lightly. "Good evening, everyone," he said with a broad smile. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this incredible milestone." The crowd quieted, attention turning toward him. "Tonight, we honor my daughter Cassandra," he continued, "who has worked tirelessly to achieve her dream of becoming a doctor." Applause filled the room. I stood near the edge of the crowd, my hands clenched at my sides. "There's nothing more rewarding," my father went on, "than watching your children succeed. My wife and I have been blessed with 2 remarkable daughters." 2. My jaw tightened. Both intelligent. Both driven. Both determined to make their mark on the world. Cassandra stood beside my mother, glowing. My mother dabbed at her eyes like she was overwhelmed with pride. "Our eldest couldn't be here tonight due to work commitments overseas," my father said smoothly. "But she sends her love and congratulations. She's built a very successful design business and travels extensively." The lie rolled off his tongue like truth. I felt something in me snap. Professor Howard appeared beside me again, smiling politely. Lovely speech, he said. Though I didn't realize you had a sister. I turned to him slowly. That's interesting, I said. Because I am his other daughter. He stared at me, confused. But he just said you were overseas. He lied, I said calmly. I've been here all evening. His expression shifted as understanding began to dawn. Before he could respond, Dr. Gregory joined us, sensing the tension. Is everything all right? He asked. I looked at both of them and made a decision. Dr. Gregory, I said, before we move forward with any business discussion, there's something you need to know. Dr. Gregory looked at me with polite curiosity, the kind reserved for conversations that are about to turn uncomfortable. Go on, he said. My full name is Julia, I continued evenly. I share a last name with Cassandra because she's my sister. I'm the daughter my father just mentioned in his speech. The one he said was overseas. Dr. Gregory blinked. I don't understand. You're here. Exactly, I said. He's been lying. Professor Howard's face went pale. He looked from me to the stage, then back again. But he said you were doing very well. That he was proud of you. I am doing well, I said quietly. But not because of them. And they don't know anything about my life. They disowned me 5 years ago when I dropped out of college due to mental health issues. Cut me off completely. Told me never to contact them again. The words felt heavy, but steady. I wasn't shaking anymore. Dr. Gregory frowned. That's a serious claim. It's not a claim, I said. It's the truth. And tonight I discovered they'd been lying about me for years. Worse, I overheard my sister discussing plans with my mother to steal my inheritance. I recorded the conversation. Professor Howard inhaled sharply. Julia, that's horrifying. I nodded. I didn't come here to cause a scene. I came because I wanted to face them. But I didn't expect to uncover something this calculated. Dr. Gregory studied my face for a long moment. Can you prove who you are? I pulled my driver's license from my wallet and handed it to him. He checked the name, the birth date, then handed it back. I believe you, he said slowly. And I'm deeply disturbed by what you're describing. My heart sank slightly. I understand if this complicates our business discussion. Professor Howard spoke before Dr. Gregory could respond. With respect, her family's behavior has nothing to do with her professional merit. Julia was one of the most gifted students I taught. Her work speaks for itself. Dr. Gregory nodded. You're right. Personal matters aside, our conversation about the medical school stands. I'll be in touch. Relief washed through me, but it didn't last. I saw my mother approaching. She wore the same polished smile she used for donors and business partners, but it faltered when her eyes landed on me. Recognition flickered, then panic. Julia, she whispered. Hello, Mom, I said calmly. Lovely party. Her gaze darted to Dr. Gregory and Professor Howard. What are you doing here? She asked tightly. I was invited, I said. Though I find it interesting that I've been here over an hour and no one in the family noticed me. She reached for my arm. We should talk privately. I stepped back. Why? You've been talking about me publicly all evening. Telling everyone how proud you are. How successful I am. How I'm overseas. Her smile cracked. You don't understand. We were protecting the family. Protecting the family? I repeated, loud enough that nearby guests turned to look. Is that what you call disowning your daughter when she was depressed? Kicking her out with nowhere to go? My father appeared beside her, his expression controlled but tense. This isn't the place for this. You made it the place, I said. You lied about me in your speech. Cassandra rushed over then, her face pale. What's happening? She decided to show up uninvited, my mother snapped. And cause drama. Uninvited? I turned to Cassandra. Funny, because I heard your phone call earlier. The one where you told Mom you were relieved I didn't know about the party. The one where you discussed taking my trust fund. Cassandra froze. I don't know what you're talking about. I recorded it, I said, holding up my phone. Want me to play it? You're insane, she hissed. You've always been unstable. I was struggling, I corrected. There's a difference. Professor Howard stepped forward. I taught Julia. She was extraordinarily talented. If she left school, it was because she needed support, not abandonment. Dr. Gregory folded his arms. I'd like to hear your explanation, he said to my parents. My mother's voice trembled. She was always difficult. We tried to help her. That's a lie, I said. You told me never to contact you again. You erased me. Jordan appeared at my side then, calm and solid. Everything okay? Perfect timing, I said. These are my parents. Jordan is my business partner. Jordan pulled out his tablet. Athena Design Agency, he said, showing the screen to those watching. 15 employees. 2 million in revenue last year. Built from nothing. Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. This is what she built after you threw her out, Jordan continued. And you've been taking credit for it while trying to steal her inheritance. My father's face hardened. How much is in the trust fund? That's not your concern anymore, Jordan said coolly. I looked at my family, every emotion finally settling into clarity. You have a choice, I said. Meet with my lawyer tomorrow. Sign over what's legally mine. Or I play the recording for everyone here and make sure the truth follows you everywhere. Silence. Jordan leaned in. The lawyer's here. I smiled faintly. Then I think we're done. I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving my parents standing in the middle of their perfect party, their lies unraveling behind me. The lawyer was waiting in the lobby just like Jordan said he would be. Marcus stood near one of the tall windows, jacket draped over his arm, expression sharp and focused in a way that immediately made me feel less alone. He shook my hand firmly, his eyes scanning my face like he was already assessing damage and strategy at the same time. Jordan filled me in on the basics, he said. But I want to hear everything from you. We moved to a quieter corner of the lobby, away from the noise of the party still echoing from upstairs. As soon as I started talking, everything spilled out. The disowning. The 5 years of silence. The lies I'd heard tonight. Cassandra's phone call. The trust fund. The recording. All of it. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on his legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back slightly, eyes thoughtful. You did exactly the right thing by not confronting them alone, he said. And recording that call was critical. That's direct evidence of intent to commit fraud. So they can't actually take it? I asked. The trust fund? He shook his head. Not legally. Your grandmother's will doesn't tie the money to education or family contact. Dropping out of college doesn't disqualify you. Cutting contact doesn't either. What they were planning was quiet theft, hoping you wouldn't fight back. Relief hit me so hard my knees felt weak. What happens now? I asked. Now we move fast, Marcus said. Tomorrow morning, I send a formal demand letter. We outline what we know, what we have recorded, and what will happen if they refuse to cooperate. Given how much they care about reputation, I expect they'll fold. Jordan smiled slightly. They already looked terrified. I laughed under my breath, the sound shaky but real. We wrapped up and I went home shortly after. When I stepped into my apartment, the quiet felt different than it usually did. Not heavy. Not lonely. Clean. Like something old had finally burned out. I didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. It was clarity. 3 days later, I walked into Marcus's office and saw my parents sitting across the conference table from him. Cassandra was there too. The tension in the room was thick, almost physical. My mother's eyes were red, makeup carefully repaired. My father looked older somehow, his usual confidence replaced with something tight and brittle. Cassandra wouldn't look at me at all. Marcus didn't waste time. "These are the terms," he said, sliding the documents across the table. "Full access to Julia's trust fund. Written confirmation that you have no claim to it now. Or in the future. No further contact unless initiated by my client. And an immediate end to using her name or accomplishments for social or professional gain." Their lawyer, an older man named Donald, cleared his throat. "This feels extreme." "No," Marcus said calmly. "This is restrained." My mother finally spoke. "How can you do this to us?" she asked me. "We're your family." "You stopped being my family when you threw me out," I said quietly. "I'm just making sure you can't hurt me again." Cassandra's voice cracked. "I shouldn't have said those things." "You're not sorry you said them," I replied. "You're sorry I heard them." Silence fell. One by one, they signed. When it was over, Marcus gathered the papers and stood. "You'll be notified once the transfer is complete. I suggest you comply fully and quickly." My parents left without another word. I sat there for a moment after the door closed, my hands resting flat on the table, my heart steady in a way it had never been around them. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Free," I said. "For the first time in my life." 5 days later, the trust fund transfer finalized. The number was larger than I expected, enough to secure my future comfortably. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was knowing they couldn't rewrite my story anymore. The medical school contract came through the following week. Dr. Gregory made a point of telling me the decision was based on merit alone. My agency grew faster after that, bigger clients, better opportunities, a team I trusted. I never heard from my parents again. And that was exactly how I wanted it. 6 months after that night, my life looked nothing like it used to. The trust fund transfer had settled quietly, exactly the way I wanted it. No drama. No public statements. Just a clean legal conclusion that made one thing very clear: my parents no longer had any control over me, financially or emotionally. The money sat there untouched for weeks, not because I didn't need it, but because I wanted to remind myself that I had already won without it. It wasn't a rescue. It was a confirmation. My business kept growing. The medical school project turned into a flagship contract that opened doors I didn't even know existed. People stopped asking how I got lucky and started asking how I built what I built. My team expanded. We moved into a larger office with windows that flooded the space with light. Every morning when I walked in, I felt something close to disbelief. Not at the success, but at the fact that I once believed I wasn't capable of this. News traveled fast in Nashville. What happened at Cassandra's graduation party became quiet gossip at first, then open conversation. People stopped inviting my parents to events. Business partners distanced themselves. The image they had spent decades crafting collapsed in a matter of weeks once the truth slipped out. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to explain myself. The truth carried its own weight. Cassandra finished her degree, but the doors she expected to open didn't open as easily anymore. Ethics matter in medicine, and word has a way of following people. She moved out of state not long after, trying to rebuild somewhere no one knew her last name. I didn't feel joy about that. I didn't feel sorrow either. I felt neutral. And that neutrality told me everything I needed to know about how far I'd come. My parents never apologized. Not really. They sent one message through their lawyer months later, something vague about misunderstandings and wishing me well. I didn't respond. I didn't need closure from people who only spoke when it benefited them. One evening, after everyone had left the office, I stood alone by the window, looking out at the city. I thought about the girl who stood on that porch at 22 with a suitcase and nowhere to go. The girl who believed she was unlovable because the people who were supposed to love her most said she was. I wish I could go back and tell her something. I would tell her that being rejected by the wrong people is not failure. It's redirection. I would tell her that the pain she felt wasn't proof she was weak, it was proof she was human in an environment that punished vulnerability. I would tell her that the very traits they mocked, her sensitivity, her creativity, her refusal to become someone she wasn't, were the traits that would save her life. I didn't destroy my family. I outgrew them. And that was the moment I truly understood what winning looks like. It isn't revenge. It isn't humiliation. It isn't watching someone else fall. It's standing firmly in your own life, knowing that nothing they say or do can take it away from you. They taught me conditional love. I taught myself self-worth. And that changed everything.